I never imagined I would be sharing something so personal with strangers online. But I cannot keep this to myself any longer. It has been weighing on me for months, and I need to get it out. My mother has always favored my sister, but I convinced myself that it was just in my head, that deep down, she cared about us equally. I was wrong. Nothing could have prepared me for what she did. I worked tirelessly to secure my dream job, only to have it snatched away and handed to my sister, as if my efforts meant nothing. But life has a way of setting things right, and my mother learned the hard way that some mistakes come with consequences. Let me start from the beginning. For as long as I can remember, my mother has always treated my sister, Emily, like she was the golden child. It was not something she ever openly admitted, but it was obvious in the little things. The way she spoke about Emily with pride, the way she overlooked her mistakes, the way she always made excuses for her. Meanwhile, I, the eldest daughter, was expected to be the responsible one, the independent one, the one who did not need as much love or attention. I tried not to let it get to me. I focused on my studies, poured myself into my work, and became the kind of person who could stand on her own 2 feet. I was not jealous of Emily. I just wanted to be seen, to be acknowledged for my efforts. Emily, on the other hand, was different. She was charming, bubbly, and effortlessly likable, but she never really had to struggle for anything. Whenever she messed up, my mother would swoop in and fix things for her. She floated through life, knowing that no matter what happened, someone would always be there to pick up the pieces. I never had that luxury. After years of working dead-end jobs and dealing with my mother's subtle favoritism, I finally caught a break. I had spent months applying for positions in my field, attending interviews, and dealing with rejections. It was exhausting, but I refused to give up. And then finally, it happened. I landed a job offer at a prestigious company. It was not just any job. It was the job. The kind of opportunity that could change my life. The salary was great, the benefits were incredible, and it was a position I had worked so hard to qualify for. When I got the offer letter, I was so overwhelmed that I burst into tears. I had done it. After everything, I had finally done it. I could not wait to tell my family. I thought maybe just this once, my mother would be proud of me. Maybe she would look at me the way she always looked at Emily. I was wrong. When I told her the news, she was surprisingly quiet. There was no excitement in her voice, no pride in her eyes. Instead, she just nodded and said, "That is wonderful, dear." I should have known something was off right then and there. A few days later, when I was preparing to submit my paperwork, I got a phone call from the company. The hiring manager sounded confused. We just received a confirmation email from your sister, Emily. She said she is accepting the offer on your behalf." My heart stopped. I barely remember what I said to the hiring manager. I just know that I told him there had to be some kind of mistake. But when I confronted my mother, the truth came out. She had taken my job offer and given it to Emily. "Sweetheart, you already have experience in the field. You will find another job," she said, as if she had done nothing wrong. "Emily needed this more than you. She has been struggling." I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. I could not believe what I was hearing. This was my opportunity. I had worked for it. I had earned it. And she had just given it away like it was nothing. I was too stunned to speak. My hands were shaking. Emily just stood there, looking guilty but not guilty enough to refuse the job she had stolen from me. I had spent my entire life pushing down my feelings, telling myself that I was overreacting, that maybe I was just being too sensitive. But in that moment, something inside me snapped. I was done being the overlooked daughter, and I was about to make sure my mother regretted every decision that led to this moment. I wish I could say that I handled it with grace, that I calmly explained why what she had done was wrong. But I did not. I lost it. "You had no right." My voice was shaking, but I did not care. That was my job. I worked for it. You cannot just decide to give it away like some kind of hand-me-down. My mother sighed, as if I was being dramatic. "You will find something else. You always do. But Emily, she needs this. She has been struggling, and you know that. This will give her stability." "She needs stability?" I laughed bitterly. "She has never worked for anything in her life. She has you to clean up her messes, to hand her opportunities she does not deserve. Emily finally spoke up. I did not ask for this, she said softly, avoiding my eyes. Mom just thought. No, do not even try that, I snapped. You could have told them the truth. You could have said no, but you chose to take something that was not yours. Emily bit her lip but said nothing. She knew I was right. My mother, on the other hand, doubled down. This is for the best, she insisted. Emily will do great at this job. And you, she waved a hand dismissively. You are smart. You will find something else. I could not believe what I was hearing. She did not even pretend to feel bad about it. I should have walked away then. I should have accepted that my mother would never change. But I could not let it go. So, I did something I never thought I would do. I decided to fight back. I went straight to my laptop and pulled up my emails. I still had the official job offer and all the correspondence with the hiring manager. I wrote a long, detailed email explaining that there had been a mistake, that I was the one who had been offered the position, and my mother had wrongfully interfered. I included proof, screenshots of the original emails, my signed acceptance letter that I had not yet sent, and even a copy of my resume that showed my qualifications far outweighed Emily's. Then, I took it one step further. I called the hiring manager directly. When he picked up, I kept my voice steady. I wanted to clarify something regarding the job offer. There has been a major miscommunication. I never gave permission for anyone else to accept on my behalf. There was a long pause. So, you are saying your sister was not supposed to respond? Correct, I said firmly. That job was meant for me. I did not decline it. I did not ask my sister to take my place. This was done without my consent. The manager sounded unsettled. This is highly unprofessional. We were under the impression that she had the same qualifications as you. She does not, I said bluntly. I can provide proof of that. There was another pause, then a sigh. I will have to escalate this to HR. But thank you for letting us know. I hung up, my heart pounding. I had no idea if it would work, but at least I had done something. That night, my mother tried to act like nothing had happened. She made dinner, set the table, and even smiled at me as if she had not completely betrayed me. I barely touched my food. Emily kept stealing nervous glances at me. She knew. And then the call came. Emily's phone rang, and I watched as she hesitated before answering. I could not hear the words, but I could see the way her face fell, the way her shoulders tensed. When she finally hung up, she looked at my mother, panic written all over her face. She swallowed hard. They revoked the offer. My mother froze. What? They said there was a misunderstanding, that I was not the original candidate. My mother turned to me, her expression unreadable. Did you do this? I met her gaze without flinching. I corrected a mistake. Her face twisted in anger. You are so selfish. Emily needed this. How could you sabotage your own sister? I let out a cold laugh. Sabotage? You sabotaged me. You stole something that belonged to me and gave it away like I was nothing. Emily's lip trembled. No. I cut her off. Do not try to play the victim now. You knew it was wrong. You knew. And you took it anyway. She looked away ashamed. My mother, however, was not done. You will regret this, she said, her voice low with fury. Mark my words, you will regret this. I stood up from the table, my heart pounding. No, I said, my voice steady. The only person who is going to regret anything here is you. And for the first time in my life, I saw something in her eyes I had never seen before. Doubt. The days that followed were filled with an unbearable tension. My mother barely spoke to me. When she did, it was in clipped, passive-aggressive remarks meant to make me feel guilty. I hope you are happy now, she muttered one morning as I walked into the kitchen. I ignored her. Emily had gone quiet too. She stayed in her room most of the time, avoiding me. But I could hear her talking to friends on the phone, hear the frustration in her voice as she complained about how unfair it was. Unfair. She had stolen my job, and she had the nerve to call it unfair? I focused on what mattered, securing my position. The company had been understanding about the whole situation, but I knew that trust was fragile. I threw myself into onboarding, determined to prove that I deserved this opportunity. And then the fallout hit my mother harder than I expected. I was sitting in the living room, going over some paperwork, when my mother stormed in, phone in hand. Her face was red with anger. "What did you do?" she snapped. I frowned. "What are you talking about?" She shoved the phone toward me. "Emily just got rejected from another job. The interviewer knew about what happened. They knew she lied." My eyebrows shot up. "And how is that my fault? You ruined her reputation." My mother's voice was filled with accusation. "No company wants to hire someone who tried to steal a job. This is your doing." I shook my head in disbelief. "She did this to herself, Mom. Actions have consequences. Maybe if she had gotten a job on her own instead of taking mine, she would not be in this mess." "You do not understand," she snapped. "She needs this." And I did not. My voice was calm but firm. I was the one who worked for this. I was the one who spent years trying to get here. And instead of being proud of me, you stole from me. You both did. My mother's face twisted with frustration. I was just trying to help her. You were never trying to help me. For the first time, her anger faltered. I took a deep breath and stood up. I have spent my whole life being pushed aside for Emily. And I took it. I told myself that it was not a big deal, that maybe I was just overreacting. But I was not. You never saw me the way you saw her. Silence. I saw something flicker across my mother's face, something like realization. Or maybe it was just regret. "Is that really how you feel?" she asked quietly. "That is how you made me feel." Her lips pressed together, but she did not deny it. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had the power in the conversation. I was done waiting for her approval, done waiting to be seen. I turned to leave, but before I could, she spoke again. "Are you going to leave us behind now? Just because of one mistake?" I paused. "This was not one mistake, Mom. It was a lifetime of them." And then I walked away. The silence between my mother and me stretched for days. She was used to me bending, to me being the one to smooth things over. But this time I did not. I focused on my new job, determined to prove myself. It was not easy. The first few weeks were overwhelming. There was so much to learn, so many expectations. But every time I felt doubt creeping in, I reminded myself, I had earned this. And despite everything, I was good at it. That was something my mother never understood. I was not just smart or capable. I had worked for this. I had spent years preparing, building my skills, pushing myself. Emily had never had to do that. She always had a safety net. But now that net was gone. One evening, Emily finally broke the silence. I was in the living room when she walked in, hesitating at the doorway. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I set my laptop aside and nodded. She sat down across from me, fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "I know I messed up," she said. "I should have told them the truth. I should have told Mom no." I stayed quiet, letting her continue. She sighed. "I have never been good at anything. You always had everything figured out. I think Mom knew that too. That is why she always pushed so hard to help me." "Helping you should not have come at my expense," I said simply. "I know." She swallowed. "And I am sorry." I studied her for a long moment. I could tell she meant it, but the damage was done. "I appreciate that," I said. "But sorry does not fix everything." She nodded, looking down at her hands. "I just hope one day you can forgive me." I did not respond to that. I did not know if I could forgive her. Maybe one day, but not yet. As for my mother, things were different now. She never outright apologized. That was not who she was. But she stopped pushing, stopped trying to manipulate me into feeling guilty. And that in itself was an apology in its own way. I moved out a few months later. It was time. I found a small apartment closer to my job, a space that was mine. No family expectations, no lingering resentment, just a fresh start. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. The silence between my mother and me stretched for days. She was used to me bending, to me being the one to smooth things over. But this time, I did not. I refused to be the one to apologize for something I had every right to be angry about. And my mother hated that. At first, she tried the usual passive-aggressive tactics. She would sigh loudly whenever I walked into a room, mutter something under her breath about family loyalty, and act like I had personally ruined her life. But I ignored it. Then, when she realized that was not working, she tried guilt. "You know, Emily is really struggling now," she said one afternoon as I was making myself a cup of tea. I did not look at her. I am sure she is. She lost another job opportunity. People talk, you know. The hiring manager from your company knows people at other firms. Word spreads. I stirred my tea calmly. Actions have consequences. My mother's jaw tightened. You did not have to go that far. I did not do anything except take back what was mine, I said firmly. Emily is facing the consequences of her own actions. That is not my fault. My mother scoffed, shaking her head. I do not understand how you can be so cold toward your own sister. That made me laugh, a sharp, bitter sound. Cold? You stole from me, Mom. You went behind my back and handed my future to someone else like I was disposable. And now you want me to feel bad. For once she had nothing to say, and I walked away without another word. As much as I hated to admit it, my mother had been right about one thing. Emily was struggling. At first, she avoided me entirely, locking herself in her room for hours on end. But eventually, she started creeping out more, her expression less defiant and more lost. I caught her in the kitchen one night, sitting at the table with her head in her hands. She did not notice me at first, so I hesitated watching her. She looked exhausted, like the weight of the world had finally crashed down on her. I should have felt satisfied, should have felt like she deserved it. But all I felt was tired. You okay? I finally asked, breaking the silence. Emily flinched slightly, looking up at me. There was no anger in her face, no resentment, just pure exhaustion. I do not know, she admitted. I leaned against the counter, waiting. After a long pause, she sighed. I lost another interview today. They knew about what happened. They did not say it outright, but I could tell. She swallowed hard. I am screwed. I did not say anything. I know I messed up, she said after a moment. I should have told them the truth. I should have told Mom no. Her voice cracked slightly, and I saw something I had never seen before, genuine regret. For so long, I had convinced myself that Emily had been a willing participant in this, that she had wanted to take from me. But looking at her now, I realized she had just been doing what she had always done, following our mother's lead. And for the first time, I wondered if she had ever even been given a choice in the kind of person she became. Helping you should not have come at my expense, I said, my voice steady. I know. She swallowed. And I am sorry. I studied her for a long moment. I could tell she meant it, but the damage was done. I appreciate that, I said finally. But sorry does not fix everything. She nodded slowly, looking down at her hands. I just hope, one day you can forgive me. I did not respond to that. I did not know if I could forgive her. Maybe one day. But not yet. As for my mother, things were different now. She never outright apologized. That was not who she was. But something had shifted. She stopped pushing, stopped trying to manipulate me into feeling guilty. And that in itself was an apology in its own way. She knew she had lost control over me. And I knew I could never trust her again. It was not a sudden realization. It was something that settled into me gradually over the next few months. The way she spoke to me differently, the way she hesitated before making demands, the way she knew she had crossed a line she could never uncross. And I was done pretending things could go back to the way they were. So I started planning my exit. I had been saving up for a while, always knowing that I would need my own space eventually. But now there was urgency. I could not stay in a house where I had to constantly fight for my own dignity. I found a small apartment closer to my job, a one-bedroom place with just enough space for me to breathe. It was not fancy, but it was mine. When I told my mother I was moving out, she did not argue. She just sighed and said, I guess this was inevitable. I did not respond. She helped me pack, but there was a distance between us, a quiet understanding that things would never be the same. On the day I moved, Emily hugged me tightly before I left. I really am sorry, she whispered. I gave her a small nod. Take care of yourself. And then I walked out. The first night in my new place was strange. I was so used to the noise, the tension, the constant pressure of living under my mother's expectations. But now there was just silence. At first it was unsettling. I kept expecting to hear my mother's voice, to feel her presence hovering over me. But as the hours passed, I started to realize something. This was freedom. No one was going to undermine me here. No one was going to steal my opportunities or make me feel like I was not enough. I had built this life for myself, and no one could take it away from me. The first few months in my new apartment were strange but liberating. For the first time in my life, I was making decisions purely for myself. I decorated the place exactly how I wanted, simple, modern, and peaceful. I cooked meals at my own pace, worked late without worrying about judgmental sighs from my mother, and spent weekends simply being, without obligations, without guilt. At first, I thought I would feel lonely, but the truth was, I had never felt less alone. I was free. I had spent so many years living in the shadow of my family's expectations that I had never stopped to consider what I truly wanted for myself. Now I finally had the chance to find out, and I was not going to waste it. Emily and I still talked occasionally, but things were different. The dynamic had shifted. She had finally managed to land a job, but it was not nearly as prestigious as the one she had taken from me. It was an entry-level position, and from what she told me, she struggled with it. She was not used to earning things. There were moments when I wanted to help her, to offer advice or support. But then I would remember how easily she had taken something that belonged to me, how she had only apologized after facing the consequences. I had spent my entire life making things easier for her. I was not going to do that anymore. She had to figure it out on her own. And my mother? Well, let us just say that she learned a hard lesson. She had always seen me as the strong one, the daughter who could handle anything, who would always be fine no matter what. She thought she could push me aside, sacrifice my success for Emily's, and I would just accept it. She was wrong. She tried to reach out a few times, mostly through passive attempts to re-enter my life. A random text about an old family recipe, a comment on one of my social media posts, an invitation to some distant cousin's wedding. But she never apologized. And I never asked her to, because the truth is I did not need it anymore. I did not need her validation. I did not need her approval. For the first time, I truly understood that her love had always been conditional, based on what I could provide, what I could sacrifice, what I could endure. And I was done enduring. One evening, months later, I got a call from Emily. I hesitated before answering, but something in me told me to pick up. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied. There was a long pause. Then she let out a shaky breath. "I had a fight with Mom." I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. She kept going on about how I should be doing better, how I was not trying hard enough. She compared me to you, said I should have learned something from you by now. She let out a bitter laugh. Can you believe that? I could actually. She made me feel like I was worthless, Emily admitted, her voice small. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. Yeah, I said. I know the feeling. Another pause. I guess I never really saw it before, she murmured. Not the way you did. I leaned back against my couch, staring at the ceiling. It is different when you are the favorite. You do not see the cost until it is your turn to pay it. Emily sniffled. Yeah, I guess you are right. For the first time, I felt something shift between us. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. But it was understanding. And maybe that was a start. I ended the call feeling lighter than I had in years. My mother had spent a lifetime trying to control everything, to shape our futures according to her own expectations. But in the end, all she had done was drive us both away. She had handed Emily an opportunity that was never hers to take. And in the end, she had lost us both. As I sat in my quiet apartment, sipping a cup of tea, I realized something. I had always been afraid of standing up for myself. Afraid that if I did, I would lose everything. My family, my place in their world, my sense of belonging. But I had stood up. I had fought for what was mine. And I had not lost myself. If anything, I had finally found me. And that was worth everything.